Hello, my name is Emmy Smith. And before I get into my presentation, I would just like to start with a quick thank you to my mentor, Patrick Gantert, and my peer supports, both near and far. I know it's been a very long day for everyone, and I want to thank you for being here with me. So we'll just do a quick wellness exercise to make room for some new mythologies. This is kind of a sideways take on that, but take it for what you will. So today I'm going to use 4 organizing images to take you through my artwork. Those images will be horse, beach, toxicity/bloom, and hands. Referencing natural processes is reflective of the research and the themes that inform my artwork. Before I get into it, I will briefly say, so what do I make? I make drawings, I make things, and I make books. And typically I present in an installation format. Byung-Chul Han examines things as still objects in an ever-changing world. And these are still things that we can use to know ourselves as we change by the contrast of their self-sameness. So we'll get started with these organizing images, beginning with the horse. This is a photo that I took in Vernon, Utah in 2017, showing a handful of wild horses. Shout out to iPhoto for remembering the details for me. This image is about roaming. It's about gesture drawing, which is the core of my artistic work. The ink is a fast and fluid medium that records equally my intended subject and my state through its sensitivity to my movement. Drawing is a somatic process in this way, maneuvering through the landscape. The horse moving through the sparse landscape of the West Desert of Utah is a metaphor for my drawing process, where I attempt to work from a place of relaxed visualization, using a loose gaze and allowing myself to create the composition responsively. However, wild horses, which were brought over by Spanish conquistadors in the late 1400s, are actually quite contained. Here is some information on population control and reproductive regulation from the Bureau of Land Management. And I bring this up to complicate the idea of the mind, like the horse being completely free. It too is a product of colonialism. Its communities are surveilled and maintained, not only for the benefit of the animal and the landscape, but with the horse, this is also to optimize adoption desirability, as horses of different colors are brought from various herds across the state to create an attractive offspring for auction. And as this bears on my work, I live in a city, I am online, and I do not live a life that is pure and unsurveilled. I use this gesture drawing modality of wandering to make drawings. This mode of drawing is the core of my work, and this is a drawing called House. The animal of this horse metaphor is important. Agamben speaks about the animal's ability to have its psyche captured by desire, but also by virtue of its lack of self-determination, an animal cannot truly be captive to desire. Sometimes this animal like neither nor is literal in my work. Here you can see the feet of this saint figure blending into the strokes of the dog's fur, both captured and not captured. My drawings are very large. This work is a medium-sized drawing for me, about 7 by 5 feet, 5 by 7, I guess I should say. Line quality and gesture come first in this work, and drawing at a large scale means the motions come from my arm and my whole body rather than just my wrist. Sometimes tighter movements of the trained wrist come into play, defining areas of rich detail with greater density and gravity. These details function differently, as they were made differently. And here I have used detail again to bring us closer into an area where the plane is especially disrupted and the body and the cloth are both kind of not making sense, but you have this little detailed edge of the cloth. And I approach gesture drawing from an embodied place, and rendering a figure that's larger than life is a pretty strange embodiment. The fidelity of the figure has a lot of room to take shape in energetic line work. It warps around my experience and my state. Often my leg with nerve damage will appear shorter, shriveled, or less rendered than my good leg. These portraits aren't completely literal either, and some distortions are coincidences or have meanings I don't understand, which leaves the work open to the viewer. This drawing, at almost 14 feet long, cannot be taken in at one perspective, so I'm going to go through a few close-ups. Here it is displayed as I made it, spilling down onto the floor. It can also be hung at height, placing the top well above the viewer's head. You have to move around to look at it, as I had to move around to make it. As queer works, these are not meant for easy consumption, and they make a demand on the viewer to look closely. And I'll take you through a few detail shots. Here you can see the garden in the upper left corner. There's a shed and a faint brick apartment building with a fenced dog run. These are details denied to the lazy onlooker. And here are the boots. So, second image, beach. Earlier, I referred to drawing as the core of my body of work. The core cannot stay put without satellites, since that's how bodies work, gravitationally and never in isolation. The beach describes the way that objects or drawings are rearranged in cycles in my installations, the way that this plant material and stone have been rearranged by the waves. Here's a close view of a site-specific installation called Room Temperature, which I put up last March. There are actual beach rocks, which is part of how I made the connection. The room is dimly lit, the work is placed throughout the space, and can only be seen if you go around and look. I would characterize this activity as the activity of the beachcomber. The space is full of natural-ish items, and as you go around, you'll start to find patterns in materials, shapes, and distribution. And so here we zoom out a little bit and zoom out again. The spotlight is being directed by a mirror, which you can see here on the slide, which was placed on an armature hung in a particular spot at a particular angle from the ceiling. This is intended to work within the theatrical aesthetics of the stage, where the installation was up, but also give a soft light, like light reflected upward from water. Before installing work, I always sweep and mop the floors. It gives a little care and sometimes yields good results. Sometimes I find a treasure, like these pearls, which I found on the stage at the MFA building. Who knows how many years they've been there. I incorporated them into Room Temperature, the installation I just showed you. And then I found even more plastic pearls throughout the summer while walking around my neighborhood, and used a mix of them and the previous pearls in a piece called Pharmacy, which I showed in a group exhibit called Encouraged Behavior this summer. And the use of the plastic material is obviously a little different than some of the other sort of paper and wood textures you've seen in my work before, and it leads me to this slide, toxicity/blooms. So this photo was taken at a place called Elephant Hunters Caves, at a location the online historical marker database describes as near Idaho Falls on West Arco Highway, US 20 at milepost 291, near North 135 West, which is to say, sort of in the middle of nowhere. This photo shows us two very distant points on the time scale, with a 6.6 million year old volcanic rock from the Heiss volcanic field and a key from a keyboard with an icon of the internet, which places it to be between the 90s and sort of mid 2000s, 2010s. It is a plastic made from materials distilled from the oily goo that used to belong to the bodies of the life forms that weren't even going to be born yet for another several million years after this rock was created. And then this image I use as the cover of a chapbook that I'm working on a 3 series of. This is the road sign that prompted me to pull over, always pull over. In these chapbooks, I examine what it is to be alive during climate catastrophe through modern lenses of the internet, cars, and work, among other things. While I strive for an unscripted outcome in my drawings and sculptural works, my written work is intended to engage with ecological grief, theory, and reportage. So here's a spread with an essay, which we're obviously not going to read here, which is in one of my chapbooks. And bloom is a metaphor for the potential for reproduction. It's part of the sexual reproductive cycle of a flowering plant. And production and reproduction in contemporary time are marked by hyperproliferation and toxicity, whether that's social toxicity or of white patriarchy, for instance, or widespread chemical toxicity. And here's the following spread. I explore these themes through a combination of imagery from the internet, from internet searches, social media, and iPhone photos that I take as I go through my life. Here shown is a necklace that I got at an estate sale beneath a Tupperware lid, paired with text about the dynamics of power and domination present in a new car. The final image is hands, and hands are representative of work, labor, and craft, but they're also highly gendered. They can both act and bear the trace of actions done to them and actions that they have done. So here's an image of me with fake nails on, holding a sprouting onion, which I've also placed fake nails on. Hands and limbs in my work often reference the artist who's had the greatest impact on my work, Egon Schiele, who he worked in, these works are from the early 1900s, and he died tragically from a Spanish flu epidemic in 1918 when he was quite young. His hands are often some of the most highly detailed parts of a drawing, and they're never plump or soft or relaxed, even as you might expect to see them rendered, especially at that time, and especially on a female figure. So most of my research efforts go toward philosophy and ecology, fire, wastewater systems, animal ecosystems, whose common theme is life. Gesture drawing doesn't seek to imitate artistic trends in my work as much as to expose an inner state. And having grown up in the Mountain West, ecology has always been a huge influence. And so with that, we'll conclude. And I would like to go ahead and open it up for questions. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Emmy. It was wonderful to see your work and to hear your presentation. Let's open it up for questions from folks. Got some good vibes coming your way. Abe is asking, can you speak to the limited color palette in your painting?
Definitely. I think that because I think a lot of it has been influenced by growing up in the Mountain West, where you have a really sparse palette to work with, especially in the winters, which is not dissimilar from here. One difference, I think, with where I grew up, the sun will set behind the mountains, and so you get this sort of piercing red. And sort of the red is this like, I mean, I think it's the slowest wavelength, so it goes deepest into the ocean. And there's something really compelling and relaxing about red, and how when an image is shown in all red as the only color, like red and black, it kind of functions as a black and white image, which you don't get with other colors. So it's somewhat of just like a pure affinity, and really a desire to keep the fidelity toward line work and gesture work and away from painting at this time. Although, who knows, the future.
Sounds good. Thank you. Angela says, lovely work, Emmy. Can you talk about your reasoning behind drawing on different canvases? By canvases, I'm referring to drawings on brown craft paper or white paper, or drawing directly on the wall.
Definitely. Substrate has been probably the biggest exploration of mine in grad school so far. Just trying to work out how to keep the integrity of a drawing, moving on to more expensive paper, for instance, which has been a recent attempt and really interesting because there are different textures to that paper, different qualities. There's a different quality to working on expensive paper. And then working on the wall directly was in response to a group exhibition with some collaborators, Abe and Rosario, who you've both heard speak today. And working on the wall really opens up the dimensions, because I like to kind of respond to the whole space with my drawings. And so I found that can be a really productive way of working. However, I have to paint over them, so that can be a little, there just are different challenges with all of these materials.
Sure. Thank you, Emmy. Rio says, how have the chapbooks affected your drawings, if at all? Are the two in conversation or simply two modes of creating?
I would say that they are two modes of creating. I kind of think of them pulling from the same place, but being very different modes of expression. So while the drawings are accessing ideas that I maybe am like developing and thinking about more because of my work on the chapbooks, I don't think it's possible for me really to detect any kind of direct relationship of development between the two. Especially gesture drawing, I really try to keep it pretty separate, try to let it kind of be what it is.
Okay. I've got one more for you, Emmy. Anne had asked, how do you perceive how elements of figuration affect the narration of your work? Does that shift in works without figuration?
Yes, the figure is a huge element of my work. I most often am working figuratively because of the sort of strange embodiment of making a figure and sort of seeing what that can reveal about an inner state. And so removing the figure is a really interesting challenge for me. You know, how can I still be making a drawing if I'm not relying on the figure to be communicating all of this really direct bodily information? So then it comes down to more of a place of symbols and composition, which I think can be a really important exercise for me and sometimes yield really interesting drawings because it's kind of pushing my abilities and my tendencies.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.